It was World Poker Series time in Las Vegas again, and nearly 30,000 players had come to town. The laws of probability would eliminate most, but some few had shown up sheathed in layers of their own luck, and other laws ruled over them. At other times of the year, the lucky either kept to themselves and won big, or went head to head and canceled each other out. Neither outcome caused too much concern. The city had been built to absorb a certain amount of random chance. Tournaments changed all that. Too much luck flowed into the city during tournaments, crashing against well-ordered probability like waves upon the shore. The man currently known as Johnny Feldspar surfed in those waves. He had a gift for tapping into excess luck and draining it away, and for years now had earned a good living doing it. But as the annual tournament grew, it had brought ever larger amounts of luck into the city. So much that at times the luck coalesced. When that happened, it acquired a modicum of consciousness and would flee out into the desert. Self-aware fields of rampant improbability couldn't be left to roam unchecked. 2 hours ago, the agency that employed Johnny Feldspar had sent him after such a glob of wild luck. Now he sat with his head against the steering wheel of his rental car and felt the pull of improbability like a lover's tongue caressing the curve of his left ear. No way he was going to use his own car, assuming he even owned one. The moment he'd donned the agency's Feldspar persona, he'd left his own identity and most of his personal memory behind. The only thing Johnny Feldspar owned were the clothes on his back and a wallet with bogus ID and agency-provided credit cards. He'd rented a brand new town car for the day with one of those cards, paying for the extra insurance. With this much wild luck involved, it seemed like a good bet that he'd need it. He was an hour out from Las Vegas. 20 minutes ago, he'd left the road and driven across the desert. The car's engine had quit like a World War II Army Jeep in the throes of a secret Nazi energy dampening field. The tug, tug, tug of extremely unlikely events in the offing tantalized his special senses. Nazis would have been a welcome alternative, even in Las Vegas, even in the desert. Feldspar banged his head to clear it, banged it hard enough to sound the horn, but not sufficient to trigger the airbag. Jesus, what the hell's wrong with you? We're supposed to be inconspicuous. Feldspar looked up, reseated the crooked, optically enhancing sunglasses on his nose. In the city he worked alone, but the agency liked to send a team out when the jobs got this big. He regarded his partner du jour, Johnny Schist, a man who apparently worried about not standing out while parked in the middle of nowhere. They'd worked together before. Schist's talent involves shaping the luck, imposing semantic parameters on its raw substance. Feldspar had once seen the man bind a ravenous pool of improbability into the logic and shape of 7 Academy Award statuettes for Best Actor. They'd sold them to a pawn shop just off the strip. Feldspar knew better than to say anything to Schist. Speech was particularly susceptible to the quantum fluctuations of wild luck. Telling Schist to chill could come out as something else. Schist might hear him speak eloquently on the versatility of cartoon vocalist Mel Blanc. More likely, Schist would hear something to cause him to whip out his weapon and blow Feldspar away. Quantum fields were funny that way, expert at protecting themselves from sensitives like him. So he said nothing, did nothing. Sooner or later, Schist would remember the protocol for team assignments. Until then, Feldspar didn't do anything except sit still, hands balled into fists shoved in the pockets of his regulation duster. Prick, said Schist, which Feldspar knew probably wasn't what he'd actually said. Prick being his own push-button word ever since a landmine in Kyrgyzstan had taken his. Knowing this, knowing how probability worked here of all places, almost took the sting out of it. He squeezed his hands tighter, imagining chunks of coal in his fists being turned into diamond. Schist opened the car door and stepped back, waiting for him to get out. Feldspar obliged, still silent, not daring to look at his partner. He moved to the trunk, opened it, and began removing a series of telescoping poles, like the legs of a photographer's tripod, constructed by the bastard love child of Anton Mesler and Nikola Tesla. Schiss kept talking, saying something about arboreal mammals and milk chocolate. Feldspar ignored him and continued assembling the pieces until he had a sideless box of circuitry about the size of an old-style phone booth. He stepped within, uncertain if the agency's mobile Faraday cage would make a damn bit of difference. The yearning in his brain stopped at once. Portions of his cognition swung, pendulum style, and the sudden emptiness gnawed at him in equal measure to the recent tug. He gripped the sides of his cage and started walking forward into a sudden epiphenomenal wind, a sure sign that the luck they'd stalked knew they had arrived. Johnny Schist, garbed in an identical gray duster and opaque sunglasses, followed, oblivious to the siren song of the nigh impossibility of the nearby quantum field. "How'd I get hooked up with a dickless wonder like you?" Schist's voice had taken on a musical lilt, even as it dropped 2 octaves. The man's coat whipped around him, and he gestured an incongruously grassy knoll in the middle of an otherwise empty desert, leaving Johnny Feldspar to wonder what he'd actually said, and why the man kept talking. He set the cage down and looked where Schist had indicated, channeling his sensitivity in an effort to determine whether or not the small existed, or only seemed to be there. The physical manifestation of something lush and green in the middle of otherwise lifeless terrain wasn't a problem. It was a one-shot fluctuation, an effect that probably sloughed off from the wild luck without too much of an energy expenditure. The wind, on the other hand, was an ongoing outflow of energy, suggesting an even more coherent field than he'd been led to expect. Not a good sign. Schist didn't appear to share his concern. "Easy peasy," sang the other man, raising spread fingers to his forehead like a cheap mentalist act. "Like shooting fish in a barrel. Prick." Feldspar glared at him. He could feel the meme that Schist was sending out. The literal son of a bitch was projecting semantic primitives that combined into structures of wooden staves and iron hoops and schools of mackerel. "Just don't screw it up," Feldspar said, clapping a hand over his own mouth an instant later. The grass rippled, and the wind carried globs of improbability their way. Johnny Feldspar deftly snagged the rampant luck out of the air and drained it away, leaving his partner free to work. Tiny fish began to manifest among blades of grass, and several wooden casks popped into existence and rolled toward them. Schist's face bore a scrunched-up look of concentration, and his hands started to tremble. The wind picked up, lifted one of the casks into the air, and flung it at Feldspar. It smashed his fragile Faraday cage and sent him crashing into his partner. Feldspar gasped, the yearning ache in his head suddenly back with a vengeance that blocked out every other sensation. Schist screamed, but not because of the contact. The wild luck had used the physical attack merely as a distraction, while simultaneously sending its mojo back along the conduit of Schist's meme. Feldspar knew it the instant Schist cried out, but couldn't prevent it. Schist's eyes glazed over, his hands fell from his face, and he worked his jaw. Improbability ticked time back a few seconds. "Fish in a barrow," Schist said, slurring the last word into new meaning and altering history as well as the meme. Feldspar felt it reverberate within him as the meme played top-down games with his unconscious mind and bottom-up tomfoolery with a distorted environment. From the look on his face, Schist felt it too. "White fish in a barrow. Cold and white." Schist? Barrow white. The wind fell away, and Feldspar whipped around to look at the knoll that had become a tumulus, in his mind, a barrow mound. "Schist, what have you done?" A man-shaped shadow that belonged to neither of them moved like water on the face of the mound. It hurtled at Johnny Schist before the man could move and engulfed him in shade. Johnny Schist's arms dropped to his side. His duster hung in tatters, now mottled with mold. Vapor rose from his lips, already tinged a bluish purple. Feldspar staggered back, his head suddenly clear, his psychic sense silent as death. The wild luck had completely gone. He felt oddly refreshed, even vibrant. "What was my name?" said the thing had been schist, a creature out of myth, called in creation by the altered meme. Johnny Feldspar shrugged. "I wouldn't tell you if I could, you murderous bastard. There's too much power in names, too much for you to work with." Schist's body sagged. Time seemed to speed up around it, bringing both age and decay, resulting in the walking corpse of a dead field agent at 80-some years of age. "Leave me alone," the White said. "Give me his body," said Feldspar. "He is mine. Leave me alone, or I will drain the life from you as well. I will gnaw your bones in the cold darkness under the hill and deny you the peace of a natural death." Johnny Feldspar sighed, giving in to the necessities and logic the meme had created. He tapped the dictation stick on his collar. It chirped softly and began recording. "Intensity 8 improbability field confirmed and neutralized," he said. "The field now exists as a mythic entity bound to a limited locus. Coordinates to follow." "I have many bones in my barrow," said the White. "Can you not feel the legion of dead buried all around you? Leave me, or you will join them." "We're less than an hour outside Vegas. I don't doubt there's lots of bodies buried here, but you didn't have anything to do with them." Feldspar consulted the GPS readout in his watch and continued his report, rattling off the coordinates to his stick. "Recommends standard containment of this site for a minimum of 6 weeks after the tournament concludes." "Leave me!" Final note. Conversion has resulted in the loss of Agent Schist. He sighed. It was all so pointless. Recommend full death benefits be provided his beneficiaries. End reports. "Your mystic barriers will not save you," said the White, bits of schist skin falling from its arms as it railed. "Leave me, or I will take you into my barrow for all time." Yeah, he said, suddenly weary beyond the needs of his job. He gathered up the broken pieces of the Faraday cage and began trudging back to the car. He glanced once over his shoulder to see his partner's rotting flesh and bones shamble into the raised mound of his home. The car started right up, and Feldspar aimed it in the direction of the highway. By lunchtime, he'd be back in Las Vegas, a town that treated him like a pariah, but found a desperate need for his talents when too many lucky people congregated. He felt filled to bursting with the luck he'd absorbed, and for just a moment toyed with the idea of joining the tournament himself. But no, he'd find a better use for it. He'd spread it around as he always did. A walk through the cancer ward, shake the hands of a couple Elvis impersonators, and maybe even bless a few newlyweds. And before it was all spent, he'd use the last bit to get his name back.